There is a hole in your window. Right now, on every commercial flight in the world, every passenger is sitting next to a window with a deliberate hole drilled into it. No seal, no plug, a hole, and not a single airline will ever tell you it's there unless you notice it yourself and ask. That hole is about 1 millimeter wide. And it is the only reason the window next to you hasn't already exploded outward at 35,000 feet. What's actually happening outside that window? Most people don't think about what's on the other side of that glass when they're cruising at altitude. They look at the clouds, they take a photo, they pull the shade down and watch a movie. But here's what's actually out there. At 35,000 feet, the outside air temperature is roughly -65 degrees Fahrenheit. The air pressure is so low that an unprotected human being would lose consciousness in about 12 seconds. Your blood would begin to release dissolved gases. Your lungs would rupture if you tried to hold your breath. The environment outside that window is, without exaggeration, as hostile to human life as the surface of Mars. Inside the cabin, the pressure is maintained at the equivalent of about 8,000 feet of altitude. Comfortable, breathable, survivable. But that difference between the pressurized interior and the near-vacuum exterior creates an enormous amount of outward force pushing against every single surface of that aircraft. The walls, the floor, the ceiling, and the windows. Every second of every flight, those windows are being pushed from the inside with hundreds of pounds of pressure per square foot. And the only thing standing between you and that environment is 3 layers of acrylic and one tiny hole. Airplane windows are not glass. People assume they are because they look like glass, feel cold like glass, and sit in a frame like glass. But they're acrylic, a form of hardened plastic that is lighter, more flexible, and far more resistant to the kind of stress an airplane window experiences in flight. And there are 3 of them, stacked together in the same frame, each one doing a different job. The outer pane is structural. It takes the full force of the pressure differential. It is the one doing the actual work of keeping the outside out. If something is going to fail, the outer pane is designed to be the one that handles the load, and it is engineered with safety margins so large that it would take a failure far beyond anything a normal flight could produce to compromise it. The inner pane, the one your nose almost touches when you lean against the window, is the scratch pane. It's there to protect the structural layers from passengers, from fingernails, from keys, from the endless small abrasions of millions of people pressing their faces against it over the lifespan of the aircraft. It does almost nothing structural. It just takes the damage so the important layers don't have to. And in the middle is the one most people never think about, the middle pane. And drilled into the bottom of that middle pane is the hole. Here's the problem the engineers had to solve. You have an outer pane under massive pressure. You have an inner pane that passengers touch constantly. And between them, you have a sealed airspace. If that space were completely sealed, the pressure inside it would need to be managed perfectly, because any change in cabin pressure, any expansion or contraction of the aircraft structure during climb and descent would create unpredictable forces on both panes simultaneously. The outer pane would be dealing with the outside. The inner pane would be dealing with the inside. And the middle layer would be caught between 2 forces it wasn't designed to handle. The hole solves this by equalizing the pressure between the cabin and the middle layer. The tiny hole lets air move slowly between the cabin interior and the space between the middle and inner panes, which means the inner pane is always at cabin pressure, which means the inner pane is never under significant stress, which means the outer pane carries the full structural load exactly as it was designed to, without the middle layer interfering. 1 millimeter, doing the work of an entire pressure management system. But the hole does something else too. When warm, humid cabin air meets cold surfaces, it condenses, water forms. And water inside an airplane window assembly, sitting between sealed layers of acrylic at altitude, is a serious problem. Not just for visibility, for structural integrity. Water that repeatedly freezes and thaws inside a sealed unit creates microfractures. Over thousands of flights, those fractures spread. What started as a perfectly clear, perfectly strong window slowly becomes compromised in ways that are invisible to any routine inspection. The hole prevents this. By allowing a tiny, controlled movement of air through the middle layer, it creates just enough ventilation to prevent condensation from accumulating. The moisture that would otherwise be trapped has somewhere to go. The window stays clear. The acrylic stays intact. and the inspection that should find nothing does find nothing because nothing has gone wrong. One hole. Solving two completely different engineering problems at the same time. What happens when windows fail? This is where the history gets serious. Because airplane windows have failed, and the events that led engineers to design the system we just described didn't happen in a lab. They happened in the air, with people on board, and the consequences were catastrophic enough that the entire industry changed. In 1954, two de Havilland Comet aircraft broke apart in flight within months of each other. The Comet was the world's first commercial jet airliner, a technological marvel, the future of aviation, and it was killing people in a way nobody had seen before. The investigations that followed were among the most exhaustive in aviation history. Researchers pressurized and depressurized sections of the aircraft thousands of times, simulating the stress cycles of a commercial flight. What they found changed everything. The windows, which were square at the time, were concentrating stress at their corners. Every pressurization cycle created tiny cracks. After enough cycles, the cracks became fractures, and the fractures became failure. Round windows came directly from those disasters. The round shape distributes stress evenly around the entire frame, eliminating the concentration points that destroyed the Comet. The windows on every commercial aircraft you have ever flown on are round because of those crashes. The geometry of the window is a monument to everyone who died before engineers understood why. The pressure numbers nobody talks about. Here's something that makes this more real. A standard commercial aircraft window is roughly 10 inches by 15 inches. At cruising altitude, the pressure difference between inside and outside the cabin is approximately 8 pounds per square inch. That means the total outward force on a single window at any given moment during cruise is somewhere around 1,200 pounds. Not across the whole aircraft. On one window. Your window. The one you're leaning against to look at the clouds. That force is constant. It doesn't fluctuate much during cruise. But during climb and descent, as the cabin pressurization system adjusts, the differential shifts and the windows flex. Slightly, invisibly, but they flex. And across a 30-year lifespan with thousands of flights and tens of thousands of pressurization cycles, that flexing accumulates. Which is why commercial aircraft windows are inspected, tested, and replaced on rigid schedules, not when they look bad, but when the engineering says their cycle count is approaching the limit. The window you look through isn't just a window. It's a component with a lifespan, tracked to the flight. The incidents that still happen, even with all of this engineering, windows still fail. Not catastrophically, not often, but they fail. In 2018, a Southwest Airlines flight experienced a catastrophic engine failure that sent debris into a window, shattering the outer pane. A passenger was partially pulled toward the opening before others could pull her back. She did not survive. The investigation revealed that the window had been compromised by the impact, not by a design failure, but by an event the window was never meant to withstand. What that incident also revealed was how the system performed as designed. The outer pane failed. The middle and inner panes held. The aircraft remained pressurized enough to execute an emergency descent. The pilots maintained control. And everyone else on board landed safely. A window system designed in the aftermath of disasters in the 1950s performed exactly as intended 60 years later, under conditions nobody had planned for, and kept a plane in the air. The detail, that makes it all work. So we come back to the hole. 1 millimeter. Drilled into the bottom of the middle pane of every window on every commercial aircraft flying today. Not an oversight. Not a manufacturing defect. Not something the airline forgot to seal. A deliberate, engineered, precisely sized opening that balances pressure, prevents condensation, protects the structural pane, and extends the safe operational life of the entire window assembly. It is one of the smallest details on the most complex transportation machine human beings have ever built. And it has been silently doing its job on every flight you've ever taken, every time you looked out the window and thought about nothing but the clouds. The next time you sit down in that seat and pull up that shade, look for it. Bottom of the middle pane. Small. Easy to miss. Doing more work than you'll ever see. That's the thing about the details that keep you alive. You never notice them. Until you do.